Chapter 17. As Nancy raced through the bushes, a scream rang out, shattering the peaceful silence of the park. There was another scream, and then a woman's voice cried, "What are you doing? Let go of me!" Although the shrubbery blocked Nancy's view, it didn't matter. She would have known that voice anywhere. It belonged to Brenda Carlton. The ace reporter had blown it for Nancy again. Nancy was so angry she was shaking. Mostly she was angry at herself. She'd made the deal with Brenda, and she should have known better. Brenda couldn't be trusted. She was trouble, right down to the tips of her perfectly manicured nails. Thinking about Brenda made Nancy careless for a second, and a second was all it took. A thick root lay like a snake across the path. Nancy tripped on it and went sprawling face down, right next to the bench where Daryl and Mitch Dillon had been sitting. "Well, well, who's this?" Dillon said with a sneer. "Another member of the Kitty Corps? Get up!" he ordered roughly. Nancy stood up, quickly appraising the situation. Daryl was standing a few feet from the park bench, Brenda's camera and its flash attachment on the ground in front of him. Dillon had one arm around Brenda's neck, and in his other hand he held a gun. The gun was pointed at Brenda's head. "Nancy, please," Brenda stammered. "I didn't mean for this to happen. If you just told me everything, I would have stayed out of your way." "You've been following me the whole time, haven't you?" Nancy said. Brenda nodded dumbly and then winced as Dillon tightened his grip around her throat. Brenda's eyes were terrified, and Nancy couldn't help feeling sorry for her. There was no pity in Mitch Dillon's eyes, though. They were about as compassionate as a shark's. "That's enough chit-chat, girls," he said. "It's time to stop playing games." "This isn't a game," Nancy said. Dillon eyed her coolly. "You're right, it's not. It's real life, and it's going to get rough if you don't do what I say." He shifted his glance to Daryl. "I want that camera," he said, eyeing Brenda's camera on the ground. "You hand it to me and nobody gets hurt. I'll walk out of the park and out of your lives. It'll be like a bad dream." It already is, Nancy thought. Her mind was racing, trying to figure out what to do. Then suddenly she noticed something. Bess and Alan were close by, but neither Ned nor George had followed her through the shrubs. So Dillon had no way of knowing that they were even around. Nancy knew Ned and George well enough to know that they weren't just standing by, waiting to see what happened. One of them had probably snuck out of the park already and called the police. If Nancy could keep Mitch Dillon talking, keep him from leaving somehow, then there was a chance they could get out of the mess. All she needed was time. "What happens if you don't get the camera?" she asked. Dillon sighed wearily. "If I don't get the camera, then somebody gets hurt. Do you want to guess who?" He spoke as if Nancy were a child asking annoying questions, and Nancy decided to play along with him. "Who?" she asked. "Who do you think?" Brenda cried. "I'm the one he's pointing the gun at. Will you just give him the stupid camera so he'll let me go?" "Smart girl," Dillon said. "I suggest you follow her advice, Red." Nancy hated to be called Red, especially by someone like Dillon. "And if I don't, then you'll kill her, just like you killed Jake Webb, right?" she asked. "You're catching on fast," Dillon replied. "I already killed one nosy kid. I'm not afraid to kill another. You got it just right." At least we got the confession, Nancy told herself. No thanks to Brenda. Dylan shifted impatiently. Now, how about the camera, Red? Nancy gritted her teeth. If you want it so much, why don't you get it yourself? Nobody's stopping you. We're all just a bunch of stupid kids, remember? You may be stupid, but I'm not, Dylan said. You think I don't know what'll happen if I reach for that camera? You'll try to play hero and jump me. And even though I'd win, I just don't have time for a brawl right now. I'll bet, Nancy said. Gotta catch a plane to Russia, right? Back to the USSR. I'm starting to lose my patience. Dylan shook his head in disgust and turned to Daryl. Okay, buddy, do your partner one last favor and hand me the camera. Now. Don't do it, Daryl, Nancy shouted. Nancy, Brenda squeaked. What are you doing? He's going to kill me. That's right. Dylan was staring at Daryl. I'm going to kill her if you don't give me that camera in 10 seconds. 10. 9. Hey, Daryl held out his hands. Just keep cool, Mitch. I'll give it to you. 6. 5. Brenda opened her mouth, but no sound came out. 4. Slowly, Daryl bent down and took hold of the camera strap. As Dylan reached the count of 2, Daryl straightened up and in one quick move swung the heavy camera at Dylan's face. At that same instant, the gun went off. The gunshot set Nancy into motion. She didn't know if Dylan hit anyone, but she hurled herself at him, determined to stop him from doing any more damage. She hit him just below the knees, and as she tried to get a good grip on his jeans, Dylan reached down and took a swing at her. His fist collided with her jaw in a punch that gave her an instant headache. You really do see stars, Nancy thought. Her ears were ringing and her vision was blurred. It was hard to tell exactly what was going on, but she sensed a lot of movement around her. Then she heard a familiar voice calling to her. Don't worry, Nancy, Ned shouted. The police are on their way. Nancy rubbed her eyes and saw Ned and Alan racing together after Mitch Dillon, who was charging across an open field of grass, heading for the sidewalk that bordered the park. He was still clutching the fake tape in one hand, and the camera swung wildly by its strap in the other. If Dylan had known that neither the tape nor the camera was going to do him any good, he might have gotten away. But he was determined to take all the evidence with him, and it slowed him down. The heavy camera kept banging into his knees. It probably hurt, Nancy thought with satisfaction, which was why Dylan finally broke stride for a few seconds and tried to get a tight grip on the camera itself. Those few seconds were all it took. As Dylan grappled with the camera, Ned and Alan put on a burst of speed and reached him just as he was about to take off again. First Ned, then Alan leaped on top of Dylan, the three of them rolling over and over until they came to a jarring stop against the base of a water fountain. Dylan wasn't going anywhere for the moment. They had him. Nancy closed her eyes in relief. When she opened them again, the first person she saw was Brenda Carlton, looking more like a bag lady than a fashion-conscious reporter. Her butter-soft leather boots were covered with mud and grass stains. Her red silk blouse was missing 2 buttons, and a smear of lipstick decorated her chin. She was still sitting where Dylan had tossed her. The gun was right next to her, and every time she looked at it, she sobbed hysterically. 100 sarcastic remarks went through Nancy's mind, but before she could decide which one to say, Bess touched her shoulder. "Nan?" Her voice was shaky. "Do you know anything about gunshot wounds?" "What?" Nancy whirled around to face her friend. "Were you hit?" "No, I'm okay," Bess assured her. "It's Daryl." Daryl Gray was sitting a few feet away from Brenda. His handsome face was pale, and his eyes were full of pain. He was clutching his right shoulder, and even as Nancy looked, a bright red stream of blood seeped through his fingers. "I don't think it's too bad," he said as Nancy crouched beside him, "but it sure does hurt." He grinned weakly, and Nancy smiled back. "Thank you," she said. "You really came through for us." "So did this," George said triumphantly. She emerged from the bushes and pointed at the video camera she was carrying. "I got the whole scene on tape. Every last bit of it." Nancy gave her a thumbs-up signal for victory, and at the same moment she heard a police siren, faint at first, but growing louder by the second. It was all over. They'd done it, and Nancy laughed, barely feeling the pain in her swollen jaw. End of Chapter 17.